And I'll do a screen share. Okay, so I think we're here in verse number 4. So I'll just read that again. Om Gyanat Mirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurmitanyena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. So we reached Isopanisad, verse number 4. Ane jade kam manaso javyo naina deva apnuvam purvam arshat tadavatonyan atyeti tishtad tasmin pomata ishvadadati. Although fixed in his abode, the personality of Godhead is swifter than the mind and can overcome all others running. The powerful demigods cannot approach him. Although in one place he controls those who supply the air and rain, he surpasses all in excellence. Marie, do you want to read that purport?
Sure. Through mental speculation, even the greatest philosopher cannot know the Supreme Lord, who is the absolute personality of Godhead. He can be known only by his devotees through his mercy. In the Brahma Samhita, it is stated that even if a non-devotee philosopher travels through space at the speed of the wind or the mind for hundreds of millions of years, he will still find that the absolute truth is far, far away from him. The Brahma Samhita further describes that the absolute personality of Godhead has his transcendental abode, known as Goloka, where he remains and engages in his pastimes. Yet by his inconceivable potencies, he can simultaneously reach every part of his creative energy. In the Vishnu Purana, his potencies are compared to the heat and light that emanate from a fire. Although situated in one place, a fire can distribute its light and heat for some distance. Similarly, the absolute personality of Godhead, although fixed in his transcendental abode, can diffuse his different energies everywhere. Although his energies are innumerable, they can be divided into 3 principal categories: the internal potency, the marginal potency, and the external potency. There are hundreds and millions of subheadings to each of these categories. The dominating demigods who are empowered to control and administer such natural phenomena as air, light, and rain are all classified within the marginal potency of the absolute person. Lesser living beings, including humans, also belong to the Lord's marginal potency. The material world is the creation of the Lord's external potency, and the spiritual sky, where the kingdom of God is situated, is the manifestation of his internal potency. Thus, the different energies of the Lord are present everywhere. Although the Lord and his energies are non-different, one should not mistake these energies for the supreme truth. Nor should one wrongly consider that the Supreme Lord is distributed everywhere impersonally, or that he loses his personal existence. Men are accustomed to reaching conclusions according to their capacity for understanding, but the Supreme Lord is not subject to our limited capacity for understanding. It is for this reason that the Upanishads warn us that no one can approach the Lord by his own limited potency. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that not even the great rishis and suras can know him. And what to speak of the asuras, for whom there is no question of understanding the ways of the Lord. The 4th mantra of Sri Isopanisad very clearly suggests that the absolute truth is ultimately the absolute person. Otherwise, there would have been no need to mention so many details in support of his personal features. Although the individual parts and parcels of the Lord's potencies have all the symptoms of the Lord himself, they have limited spheres of activity and are therefore all limited. The parts and parcels are never equal to the whole. Therefore, they cannot appreciate the Lord's full potency. Under the influence of material nature, foolish and ignorant living beings who are but parts and parcels of the Lord try to conjecture about the Lord's transcendental position. Sri Upanishad warns of the futility of trying to establish the identity of the Lord through mental speculation. One should try to learn of the transcendence from the Lord himself, the supreme source of the Vedas, for the Lord alone has full knowledge of transcendence. Every part and parcel of the complete whole is endowed with some particular energy to act according to the Lord's will. When the part and parcel living entity forgets his particular activities under the Lord's will, he is considered to be in Maya, illusion. Thus, from the very beginning, Sri Isopanisad warns us to be very careful to play the part designated for us by the Lord. This does not mean that the individual soul has no initiative of his own. Because he is part and parcel of the Lord, he must partake of the initiative of the Lord as well. When a person properly utilizes his initiative or active nature with intelligence, understanding that everything is the Lord's potency, he can revive his original consciousness, which was lost due to association with Maya, the external energy. All power is obtained from the Lord, therefore each particular power must be utilized to execute the will of the Lord and not otherwise. The Lord can be known by one who has adopted such a submissive service attitude. Perfect knowledge means knowing the Lord in all his features, knowing his potencies, and knowing how these potencies work by his will. These matters are described by the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita, the essence of all the Upanishads.
Okay, thank you, Marie. Anyone have any comments or questions on anything we just went through? So, more or less just establishing, and I think this is in line with the previous discussion in the previous verses, and discussion of Prabhupada, just establishing the distinction, right, between the absolute, the Lord, and the finite souls such as ourselves, and entering into more of a refined conception of the absolute, the specificity, right, the detail, zooming into the forest, right, and appreciating the fine, detail of everything, the nature of, different energies, relationships, and so on. So I don't know if there's anything else to say on my part. So we can go on to the next verse then. Okay, so I kind of feel like we read this one, but this line is quite, I think I definitely referenced this line. This line is quite well known in our, actually, I think we did start this. Oh, I don't know. Anyway, this line is quite well known. Our Gurudev, I've heard him quote this a number of times in different contexts. Yeah, we definitely discussed this line. It means very near and also very far. And and there's a whole spectrum of meaning application for this concept. That the Lord can be very near to us, he can be very far. Through devotion, right, through heart, through surrender, we bring the Lord very close. But by the establishment of the false ego or false conception of life, then the Lord is very far. And our Gurudev liked very much this one verse. I believe it's in the Upanishad somewhere. Ahankara nivrittanam keshavo nahi durada ahankara yutanam hi madhya parvata rasaya, saying that for one who is free from the ahankar, from the false ego, the Lord is not far away. He is very close. But for one who has this ahankar, it is as if there is a great mountain range between them and the Lord. So the Lord is actually, he's right next door. Sometimes I think of it as like we have a neighbor, and especially in our modern society, right? There's this isolated way of living is becoming more and more prevalent. You can have a neighbor. Many people live years without knowing their next door neighbor, right? So I think of it like that, like they're right on the other side of the wall, but you don't know them, So the Lord is living in our hearts, right? No one could be closer than he, but because of that barrier, of the false ego, then it is that he could be, a million miles away. So, and in Brahma Samhita, there's that beautiful line, Vedeshu Dorlabam, Adorlabam Atma Bhakto, that, even through following the Veda, even through following the scripture, it's very difficult to attain the Lord, but through natural heart's approach, through devotion, he is very easy, he is very close. So simultaneously far, but near at the same time. And another, Srila Sridhar Maharaj has also touched on this type of idea too, that, like our position is very curious, because very peculiar, because what we're trying to cultivate, it's most natural and inherent to us, right? It's pertaining to our innate identity, right? As loving servants of the Lord, as spirit souls. So in that sense, what we're doing is so natural to us, so automatic, it should be very easy, right? In that sense. But on the other hand, we've now taken ourselves very far away, so now there's difficulty in aligning ourselves with what is actually most natural to us. I suppose you could take the example of, like sometimes I use the example of a like a twisted body, right? What feels natural to us in an abnormal state, right? That's not natural, that's not normal. But once we've, and then there will be some challenge, some difficulty in realigning and straightening ourselves out, right? So it is very, very curious position that we're in. And then another context in which I heard Gurudev refer to this phrase, like on a higher level, is in connection with the principle of union and separation with the Lord. That the devotees in their mood of devotion, sometimes they're feeling this, intense closeness and intimacy with the Lord, and I have everything. And at other times they're feeling this hopelessness and separation, vipralamba, which is actually intensifying the relationship and intensifying the feeling of closeness in a different way, right? But that's on a higher level. And of course, achincha beta bade, right? That's also indicated by this phrase, simultaneously one with and different. That is the nature of everything in existence. Everything is one with the Lord and simultaneously distinct and separate. So a lot of different ideas come out from this phrase here. Taddode tadwantike. The tade jati tainai jati taddode tadwantike tadantar asya sarvasya tadu sarvas yasya bhayata. The Supreme Lord walks and does not walk. He is far away, but he is very near as well. He is within everything, and yet he is outside of everything. And we already also had some discussion on how, this style here of Isopanisad, it's very much in line with the Upanishads in general, right? This kind of vagueness and haziness in descriptions of the absolute. And the idea is to establish the divinity of the Lord, right? To establish that he is, it's walks but does not walk. The idea is that he doesn't have mundane faculties, mundane legs, and so on. His movement is not of a mundane nature. That is what is being established, that idea. But, it can be a little confusing too. Steve, do you want to read that purport?
Okay. Although I do feel like we read this a couple meetings ago.
Yeah, I think what happened is that we started this verse. We definitely reread the last one. And this one, I think we started it, but I think we began the purport, but then we got diverted. I don't think we finished the purport.
Okay, well, I'd love to read it.
Okay.
I need to use yours though on the screen because my computer's working really slow today.
Yeah, sure.
There we
Yeah.
go. Purport. Here is a description of some of the Supreme Lord's transcendental activities executed by his inconceivable potencies. The contradictions given here prove the inconceivable potencies of the Lord. He walks and he does not walk. Ordinarily, if someone can walk, it is illogical to say he cannot walk. But in reference to God, such a contradiction simply serves to indicate his inconceivable power. With our limited fund of knowledge, we cannot accommodate such contradictions, and therefore we conceive of the Lord in terms of our limited powers of understanding. For example, the impersonalist philosophers of the Mayavad school accept only the Lord's impersonal activities and reject his personal feature. But the members of the Bhagavat school, adopting the perfect conception of the Lord, accept his inconceivable potencies and thus understand that he is both personal and impersonal. The Bhagavats know that without inconceivable potencies, there can be no meaning to the words Supreme Lord. Is that pronounced Bhagavatas or Bhagavats?
I mean, we normally
Anyway.
say Bhagavats, but actually you could do it the other way as well. There is an element of just style and preference. Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
sure.
We should not take it for granted that because we cannot see God with our eyes, the Lord has no personal existence. Sri Isopanisad refutes this argument by declaring that the Lord is far away but also very near also. The abode of the Lord is beyond the material sky, and we have no means to measure even this material sky. If the material sky extends so far, then what to speak of the spiritual sky, which is altogether beyond it? That the spiritual sky is situated far, far away from the material universe is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. But despite the Lord's being so far away, he can at once, within less than a second, descend before us with a speed swifter than that of the mind or wind. He can also run so swiftly that no one can surpass him. This has already been described in the previous mantra. Yet, when the personality of Godhead comes before us, we neglect him. Such foolish negligence is condemned by the Lord in the Bhagavad Gita, where he says that the foolish deride him, considering him a mortal being. He is not a mortal being, nor does he come before us with a body produced of material nature. There are many so-called scholars who contend that the Lord descends in a body made of matter, just like an ordinary living being. Not knowing his inconceivable power, such foolish men place the Lord on an equal level with ordinary men. Because he is full of inconceivable potencies, God can accept our service through any sort of medium, and he can convert his different potencies according to his own will. Non-believers argue either that the Lord cannot incarnate himself at all, or that if he does, he descends in a form of material energy. These arguments are nullified if we accept the existence of the Lord's inconceivable potencies. Then we will understand that even if the Lord appears before us in the form of material energy, it is quite possible for him to convert this energy into spiritual energy. Since the source of the energies is one and the same, the energies can be utilized according to the will of their source. For example, the Lord can appear in the form of the Archavigra, a deity supposedly made of earth, stone, or wood. Deity forms, although engraved from wood, stone, or other matter, are not idols, as the iconoclasts contend. In our present state of imperfect material existence, we cannot see the Supreme Lord due to imperfect vision. Yet those devotees who want to see him by means of material vision are favored by the Lord, who appears in a so-called material form to accept his devotees' service. One should not think that such devotees, who are in the lowest stage of devotional service, are worshiping an idol. They are factually worshiping the Lord, who has agreed to appear before them in an approachable way. nor is the archa form fashioned according to the whims of the worshipper. This form is eternally existent with all paraphernalia. This can be actually felt by a sincere devotee, but not by an atheist. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says how he treats his devotee depends on the devotee's degree of surrender. The Lord reserves the right not to reveal himself to anyone and everyone, but to show himself only to those souls who surrender unto him. Thus, for the surrendered soul, he is always within reach, whereas for the unsurrendered soul, he is far, far away and cannot be approached. In this connection, two words the revealed scriptures often apply to the Lord: sagun, with qualities, and nirgun, without qualities, are very important. The word saguna does not imply that when the Lord appears with perceivable qualities, he must take on a material form and be subject to the laws of material nature. For him, there is no difference between the material and spiritual energies. As the controller of all energies, he cannot at any time be under their influence, as we are. The material energy works according to his direction. Therefore, he can use that energy for his purposes without ever being influenced by any of the qualities of that energy. In this sense, he is nirgun, without qualities. Nor does the Lord become a formless entity at any time, for ultimately he is the eternal form, the primeval Lord. His impersonal aspect, or Brahman effulgence, is but the glow of his personal rays, just as the sun's rays are the glow of the sun god. 1 second. When the child Saint Prahlad Maharaj was in the presence of his atheist father, his father asked him, "Where is your God?" When Prahlad replied that God resides everywhere, the father angrily asked whether his God was within one of the pillars of the palace. And the child said yes. At once, the atheist king shattered the pillar in front of him to pieces, and the Lord instantly appeared as Nrsimha, the half-man, half-lion incarnation, and killed the atheist king. Thus the Lord is within everything, and he creates everything by his different energies. Through his inconceivable powers, he can appear at any place in order to favor his sincere devotee. Lord Nrsimha appeared from within the pillar, not by the order of the atheist king, but by the wish of his devotee Prahlad. An atheist cannot order the Lord to appear, but the Lord will appear anywhere and everywhere to show mercy to his devotee. The Bhagavad Gita similarly states that the Lord appears in order to vanquish non-believers and protect believers. Of course, the Lord has sufficient energies and agents who can vanquish atheists, but it pleases him to personally favor a devotee. Therefore, he descends as an incarnation. Actually, he descends only to favor his devotees and not for any other purpose. Should I keep going or do the whole purport? In the Brahma Samhita, it is said that Govinda, the primeval Lord, enters everything by his plenary portion. He enters the universe as well as all the atoms in the universe. He is outside in his Virat form, and he is within everything as Antaryami. As Antaryami, he witnesses everything that is going on, and he awards us the results of our actions as karmapala. We ourselves may forget what we have done in previous lives, but because the Lord witnesses our actions, the results of our actions are always there, and we have to undergo the reactions nonetheless. The fact is that there is nothing but God within and without. Everything is a manifestation of his different energies, like the heat and light emanating from a fire. And in this way, there is a oneness among his diverse energies. Although there is oneness, however, the Lord in his personal form still enjoys unlimitedly all the pleasures enjoyed minutely by the tiny part and parcel living entities. That was a lot.
Thank you, Steve. I remember what happened now. We went on a tangent about deity worship. That was where we stopped our reading last week, and we had a discussion about the difference between idol worship and deity worship. That was where we went off last week. I'm glad we can do that. I'm not sure if I have anything else to say. Perhaps just highlight these terms. I mean, I think, or I hope everyone in our group right now is familiar with these terms, nirgun and sagun. You know, they're very helpful. Saguna means with qualities. The gunas everyone's familiar with, right? Sattva, Raja, and Tama, the energies or modes of goodness, passion, and ignorance. And sa just means with. So saguna means anything, you know, within the material, within the jurisdiction of the material plane, material things, material experience, whether it's good or bad, right? And then nirguna, literally near is negating guna, so without gunas, without qualities. And that also means of a spiritual nature, of a transcendental nature. And that's something to remember, right? That ultimately that's what we're interested in, right? Because no matter how attractive and spiritual even something may look, in the mundane plane, it's still mundane. So something in the mode of goodness, right, may look spiritual. That's a mistake that we can make sometimes, to conflate, you know, sattvic practices, you know, practices in the mode of goodness with actual spiritual cultivation. We may even be carrying out our spiritual practices more in a mode of sattva gun, you know, like say with the sense of duty, or but without that real mood of surrender, right? That's what it's the mood of spirit of surrender that connects us with the divine. And so nirguna, you know, that's what we want to connect. It's the plane that is beyond anything of this mundane nature. And it can be tricky because what is nirguna, it may not match up. It may apparently appear to be something of a mundane nature, right? You know, and this is where the aprakrita lila of Krishna comes in, and then it all starts to get a little complicated, right? Aprakrita means it can appear prakrita, mundane, but it's not. It's actually that Krishna's whole lila is characterized by that, aprakrita, that, you know, he's appearing as an ordinary cowherd boy who likes to steal butter, and he has lots of girlfriends. So it's appearing to be of a saguna nature, appearing to be with mundane attributes, but it's actually not. So, you know, this is why, one reason why Krishna consciousness, it's a very sophisticated, refined, it represents a very, you know, sophisticated expression of divinity, which not everyone can be ready for, right? Because in many ways it's mirroring the mundane, mirroring that which is saguna, but it's not. And another point here is those things of a saguna nature, they can never touch on that which is nirgun. It is like it is of a different nature, like oil and water. They can't mix. Our Gurudev, I heard a couple of times he gave one analogy, he gave one story to illustrate this point, that after the battle of Kurukshetra, right, described in the Mahabharata, then there was this one sage, Rishi, Utanka. Many of you probably are familiar with this story. He came to curse Krishna because he said, Krishna, you're actually responsible. You know, so many people, they've died. You know, so many women have lost their husbands, children have lost their fathers, and you could have stopped this. I know who you are. So you're responsible, and I'm going to curse you, Krishna. And Krishna said, you know, you can go ahead and curse me if you want, but you're just going to be wasting, you know, whatever punya, whatever pious credits you've accumulated, because I'm in the nirguna plane, right? I'm in a plane that is categorically of a different nature, superior nature. And all that you have, like your whole lifetime of austerity and meditation and so on, everything you've acquired, that's all within the saguna plane. That it may look very good, it may have power in a certain plane, but it can't touch the nirguna plane, right? So you can throw all of that at me, it'll just be wasted. So, and another story, I'm sure I've told this before, and some of you know anyway. But this incident with Durvasa Muni, he's like a famous rishi. He's like a kind of avatar of Lord Shiva, as I recall. The gopis, they were going to bring him some offerings at one time. And in order to do so, they had to cross the Jamuna River, but it was very high. It was like during the rainy season, I believe. And so they came to the Jamuna River, and they prayed to her, oh, please, can you let me cross? Oh no, in fact, maybe someone else can remember better. Maybe they asked Krishna, what should we do? And Krishna told them, tell the Jamuna that Krishna is a brahmachari. Tell the Jamuna that Krishna's, a celibate monk, brahmachari. And they're like, oh, really? Well, okay, if you say so. And so they went and told that to the Jamuna, and she parted her waves. And so they were able to cross, and they brought all these special offerings to Durvasa Muni. And then it was time to go back, and the gopis said to Durvasa, oh, can you help us? How can we cross the Jamuna? And he said, well, how did you come? He said, oh, well, Krishna told us to say this to Jamuna, and she parted her waves for us. And then Durvasa said, okay, well, tell the Jamuna that Durvasa is fasting today. And they've just brought all these opulent food preparations for him. He's been feasting. But he tell the Jamuna that Durvasa is fasting today. He's doing upavas. So the gopis are a little puzzled again, but they say, okay. They're jnana shunya bhaktas, right? Knowledge free from knowledge, calculation. That is their type of devotion. And so they go back to the river and they tell the Jamuna, oh, Durvasa Muni, he's fasting today. Sure enough, she parts her waves. So we heard our Gurudev tell this story a couple of times also to illustrate this idea, right? Because the idea is that there's no attachment there. That although Krishna may be mixing with so many women, there's no mundane attachment there. It's all happening on a very pure platform. Although Durvasa Muni may be apparently enjoying taking so many rich, opulent dishes, there's no attachment there. It's all in a mood of service and sacrifice and devotion, right? So this is the nature of the Nirguna plane, right? Bhagavad Gita goes so far as to give this very extreme example that said it's in the end of Bhagavad Gita. Someone may kill the whole world, right? Create such destruction. But if they do it on a clean platform without the ego, they won't incur any karma, right? It's quite a shocking thing to say. There will be no reaction because it's all about the consciousness. So this is something that we keep in mind, especially when we are approaching the topics of Krishna Lila, because apparently they may appear to be of a mundane nature, but they're not, right? And so Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, he's making this point that these statements, which may seem a little puzzling at times, they're trying to establish that. They're trying to establish the nirguna nature of the Lord. That yes, he walks, but his walking is not of a mundane nature. Right? He's not bound by the same laws of nature that we are. Right? Everything he does is of a spiritual nature. So these kind of cryptic statements, they're trying to establish that within everything, outside of everything. Okay, I don't know if I have any other things to comment here. Anyone else have any comments or questions? Anything at all? Should we go on? And welcome to those of you who joined, Priya Hita, Scarlett, Echo, Krishna and Johnny also joined. Okay, so let's go on to verse number 6. Yastu Sarvani Bhutani Atman Yeva Nupashyati Sarva Bhuteshu Chatmanam Tato Na Vitu Vipsate. He who systematically sees everything in relation to the Supreme Lord, who sees all living entities as his parts and parcels, and who sees the Supreme Lord within everything, never hates anything or any being. This is quite beautiful, isn't it? When we see everything in connection with the Lord, then there's automatically this compassion, right? That will rise in our heart for that person. Very nice. Any volunteers to read this purport? Priyahita? Yeah, please.
This is a description of the Mahabhagavat, the great personality who sees everything in relation to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Supreme Lord's presence is realized in 3 stages. The Kanishta Adhikari is the lowest stage of realization. He goes to a place of worship, such as a temple, church, or mosque, according to his religious faith, and worships there according to scriptural injunctions. Devotees in this stage consider the Lord to be present at the place of worship and nowhere else. They cannot ascertain who is in what position in devotional service, nor can they tell who has realized the Supreme Lord. Such devotees follow the routine formulas and sometimes quarrel amongst themselves, considering one type of devotion better than another. These Kanishta Adhikaris are actually materialistic devotees who are simply trying to transcend the material boundary to reach the spiritual plane. Those who have attained the 2nd stage of realization are called Madhyama Adhikaris. These devotees observe the distinctions between 4 categories of being. 1, the Supreme Lord. 2, the devotees of the Lord. 3, the innocent who have no knowledge of the Lord. And 4, the atheists who have no faith in the Lord and hate those in devotional service. The Madhyama Adhikari behaves differently toward these 4 classes of person. He adores the Lord, considering him the object of love. He makes friends with those who are in devotional service. He tries to awaken the dormant love of God in the hearts of the innocent, and he avoids the atheists who deride the very name of the Lord. Above the Madhyama Adhikari is the Uttama Adhikari, who sees everything in relation to the Supreme Lord. Such a devotee does not discriminate between an atheist and a theist, but sees everyone as part and parcel of God. He knows that there is no essential difference between a vastly learned Brahmana and a dog in the street, because both of them are part and parcel of the Lord, although they are encaged in different bodies on account of the different qualities of their activities and their previous lives. He sees that the Brahmana particle of the Supreme Lord has not misused his little independence given him by the Lord, and that the dog particle has misused his independence and is therefore being punished by the laws of nature by being caged in the form of a dog. Not considering the respective actions of the Brahmana and the dog, the Uttama Adhikari tries to do good to both. Such a learned devotee is not misled by material bodies, but is attracted by the spiritual spark within them. Those who imitate an Uttama Adhikari by flaunting a sense of oneness or fellowship, but who behave on the bodily platform, are actually false philanthropists. The conception of universal brotherhood must be learned from an Uttama Adhikari and not from a foolish person who does not properly understand the individual soul or the Supreme Lord's supersoul expansion, who dwells everywhere. It is clearly mentioned in the 6th mantra that one should observe or systematically see. This means that one must follow the previous acharyas, the perfected teachers. Anupashyati is the exact Sanskrit word used in this connection. Anu means to follow, and pasyati means to observe. Thus, the word anupasyati means that one should not see as he does with the naked eye, but should follow the previous acharyas. Due to material defects, the naked eye cannot see anything properly. One cannot see properly unless he has heard from a superior source. And the highest source is Vedic wisdom, which is spoken by the Lord himself. Vedic truths are coming in disciplic succession from the Lord to Brahma, from Brahma to Narada, and from Narada to Vyas, and from Vyas to his many disciples. Formerly, there was no need to record the messages of the Vedas because people in earlier ages were more intelligent and had sharper memories. They could follow the instructions simply by hearing once from the mouth of a bona fide spiritual master. At present, there are so many commentaries on the revealed scriptures, but most of them are not in the line of disciplic succession coming from Srila Vyasadeva, who originally compiled the Vedic wisdom. The final, most perfect, and sublime work by Srila Vyasadeva is Srimad Bhagavatam, which is the natural commentary on the Vedanta Sutra. There is also the Bhagavad Gita, which was spoken by the Lord himself and recorded by Vyasadeva. These are the most important revealed scriptures, and any commentary that contradicts the principles of the Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam is unauthorized. There is complete agreement among the Upanishads, Vedanta Sutra, Vedas, Bhagavad Gita, and Srimad Bhagavatam, and no one should try to reach any conclusion about the Vedas without receiving instructions from members of Vyasadeva's disciplic succession, who believe in the personality of Godhead and his diverse energies as they are explained in Sri Isopanisad. According to the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 54, only one who is already on the liberated platform, Brahma Bhuta, can become an Uttama Adhikari devotee and see every living being as his own brother. This vision cannot be held by politicians who are always after some material gain. One who imitates the symptoms of an Uttama Adhikari may serve another's outward body for the purpose of fame or material reward, but he does not serve the spirit soul. Such an imitator can have no information of the spiritual world. The Uttama Adhikari sees the spirit soul within the material body and serves him as spirit. Thus, the material aspect is automatically served.
All right, thank you, Pundita. Anyone have any comments or questions from what we just went through? So, this, here Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, he's bringing in this understanding of, gradation, levels of realization. Oh, I see Scarlett just raised her hand. Okay, I'll just say something since I started. And you'll see this, it's something that is important because, like part of what Vaishnavism is all about is under, as we've been saying all along and today also, is about having a more refined and sophisticated understanding of the nature of reality. It's not that reality is just reduced to one homogenized oneness, but there's a deeper and deeper understanding of detail, right? And so there are, so one point which is brought up in scripture and by a guru sometimes is understanding gradation of devotion and devotees, practitioners, which is important because we don't treat everyone the same, right? And it's helpful for us to have some positive discrimination, right, in how we relate with different people. We won't relate with someone in kindergarten the same way that we'll relate with someone at a PhD level. Not that we're not going to give respect. We give respect to everyone, but that respect may be expressed in different ways, and we'll invest a different type of faith, right, and expectation in persons according to their level of realization. So this is like a framework that we see sometimes in Bhagavatam. It's discussed. We see it in Upadeshamrita. That's what was on my tongue. Rupa Goswami's text. He also discusses there this understanding of gradation and devotees and how we reciprocate with all of them in different ways. Even Bhaktivinoda Thakur in his songs, he references this point, how we give respect to all, but as appropriate, right? That is what is most helpful for us. And so here Swami Maharaj is referencing these well-known verses in Srimad Bhagavatam, where there's a description given of different levels of devotees. And so so generally there are these three principal categories, right? Kanishta means the very beginner level, Madhyam, middle, Uttam, highest. And so this, the nature of the Kanishta Adhikari is that, they may be very focused on the deity and the temple, but like one way Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, it may not have, like the teaching, the principles may not have pervaded their social life, right? Their day-to-day life and their day-to-day decisions and thinking, right? But yeah, on Sundays when I go to the temple, do everything really well, and one may be able to worship the deity very well, but they don't appreciate the devotee, and they can't recognize how the Lord is manifesting through the heart of his devotee, in actually a more of a living way, right? They may not be able to detect that. So this is, this is the nature of the Kanishta Adhikari. And then Madhyam, we won't consider that we're Madhyam Adhikari, actually to be a middle level is quite a high thing. But their practice is very helpful for us. The Uttam, and Swami Maharaj is also emphasizing this, it's not helpful for us to imitate the Uttam Adhikari. The Uttam, the highest level devotee, they're seeing Krishna everywhere, right? And that's not helpful for us, It's not to give an extreme example, it's not helpful for us to go into a bar and see everything is Krishna, or to think that we can convert, such persons also. That's not helpful for us. Like if we're seeing black and white, we need to operate on that level. We can't pretend that we're just seeing the light everywhere. That's not helpful for us, right? So the practice of the Madhyam Adhikari is very helpful for us. And so it's mentioned in this verse in Bhagavatam, these four different categories of persons and how the middle level Vaishnava will relate with them, right? So the prema, maitri, kripa, and upekka, these are the four terms used in that verse. So they will have prema, love for the Lord, right? This is the first category here, the Supreme Lord. They have love for the Lord, devotion, they worship the Lord. Maitri, they have friendship, they cultivate friendship with the devotees of the Lord. And of course, there will be different levels there, right? And then there's mercy, kripa. They will have mercy for the innocent, for those who don't know anything and who are open also. So they will have mercy in the sense that they'll try to connect them, they'll try to share, they'll try to help them. And that may be junior devotees, junior to practitioners to ourselves, as well as those who don't know anything about the path of devotion, but they're open, right? They're not inimical. And then the fourth class is those who are against, those who are inimical or atheists. And so it's mentioned that the Madhyam Adhikari Vaishnava will be indifferent. They'll avoid them, right? We're not Nityananda Prabhu can convert, Jagai and Madai, who are drunkard womanizers, right? But if we try to imitate that, we'll end up going over to that side. That's very likely, or our faith will be disturbed, or at best, it's just a waste of time, right? Unless there's some special empowerment, right? So that's what's recommended for persons on our level. Just avoid those if they're not interested. If we're doing Harinam, we're doing Kirtan out in a busy street, and the local shopkeeper asks us to move along, then we move along. We're not here to force things on anyone, right? Or to insist that we have to purify them with the holy name. What we will see, another issue which comes up here, if we're too forceful with people who aren't interested, is that we're actually inviting them to make offenses. We're actually making things worse for them, right? So no, it's really best to just leave them alone, right? And then Vaishnavas of a higher level, they may have, like we saw with our Guru Dev, persons like Srila Govinda Maharaj, Srila Sridhar Maharaj, Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada, they can inspire faith in persons who don't have faith. They have that type of power. Mahaprabhu can inspire the animals to chant Harinam, right? Because they have such great spiritual potency. But we don't, so understanding what's appropriate for us at our level, it's very important in our practice of Krishna consciousness. Okay, we are running out of time, and we do have a couple hands raised. Scarlett's had her hand raised, but I think Priya Hita maybe has a comment on what we've just been discussing, or something else. So I don't know who should go first.
It's very quick. It's just a term definition. Is antayami in the Brahma Samhita, when it's talking about the form of Krishna that enters into every living being, is that the same as Paramatma?
No
question.
There's a whole discussion on that.
Is that in the Brahma Samhita, to chapter 5 that it mentioned?
It's mentioned also in Chaitanya Charitamrita. And yes, I think generally, like literally Antaryami, I think it means like within, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so yes, I think generally Antaryami, it does refer to the Paramatma.
Okay, that was it.
Yes, let me see the exact where's that?
It was in the last verse, near the end. Yeah, it was mantra 5 in the very last, the second to last paragraph.
Oh, it wasn't it's not in this verse?
No, that's why I said it was just a quick, just to define, because for some reason my little mind got stuck on that. And I just wanted to make sure that at the concept of when Krishna enters, there's Garbhodakshaya, Kishoradakshaya, Vishnu, and that's what they're talking about, is the Paramatma within everybody. When I recognize Krishna within everybody, it's that Paramatma consciousness. And that is that power of Antaryami. I'm just trying to make sure that it's not that.
Oh, I don't think it's here. Oh, here it is. Okay. In the Brahma Govinda enters everything by his plenary portion. He enters the universe as well as all the atoms of the universe. He is outside in his Virat, he is within everything as Antaryami. As Antaryami, he witnesses. Yeah, he's definitely talking about Paramatma here. Because these are definitely the activities of Paramatma. He's a witness and he's awarding the results of our actions. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, that term Antaryami, it may have a broader spectrum of application, but I would say in this context, we're talking about the Paramatma. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, it is a little confusing, to be fair. Yeah, but yes, we're told, right, as you're referencing, that there are these four, they're called the Purusha avatars, right? These three manifestations of Vishnu who are maintaining the material universe. And there's the Karuna Dakashai Vishnu, who's floating in the causal ocean, and he's expanding into Garbhodakashai Vishnu, who's maintaining each individual universe. Then there's Kshirodakashai Vishnu, who's also Paramatma, existing in each, within the heart of every living being. And so, yes, it does seem like Srila Prabhupada is referring to that Paramatma feature of the Lord. Okay, Scarlett, you've been very patient.
Hare Krishna, thank you for today. Just to be sure, is that mean that, because everything we read, everything we talk about everything is Krishna. Krishna is in everything. And I have somewhat difficulty to think that way, because there are things happening in the way I see, the way I go around, the way I have been experiencing, there are things happening that is not so nice, not so good. So how can I consider that this is also Krishna? For instance, the demon, which they have done things. Also, you have to see it, consider like it is Krishna. There are so many things. It's very difficult. I don't know how to understand it. I have difficulty to understand it. For instance, there is a child molester who killed the children in very, very, very brutally. How to see it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So it's very difficult to say, to understand this. Everything is Krishna. But then everything is not beautiful as Krishna is.
Mm-hmm.
There are things that are not beautiful, like Krishna is. So I don't know how to make of it. Could you please help me?
Well, I mean, there's one example coming to mind, and you can tell me if it's helpful or not. That, because see, the key issue here that we have to remember is that of free will, right? And that, and then also a chincha bade abade. This is Mahaprabhu's conception. One and different, same, but also different. So I'll give you one. This is just what's jumping into my head right now. I don't know how useful it's going to be. Let's say a parent who has a deviant child, you know, a very upright, good, noble person who has a child who is very deviant, has, you know, so many negative tendencies and nature. Now that child is of the same DNA, right? You know, that child, you know, would have been raised in a particular way by that parent, right? And that child, you know, may look the same as the parent, right? But that child also has individuality and free will. So in many ways, they're the same, you know, but that child has their own free will and they may choose to operate in another way, right? So like, you know, our source is Krishna. We're coming from Krishna. We're made of Krishna's energy, but Krishna is also giving us free will, and we may choose to use that in a negative way, right? And then of course there's a whole system in place to help us come back in line, to align ourselves with truth and with beauty, right? That's also there. You know, the whole system of karma is a part of that. Yeah. So that's the thing, right? We're coming from Krishna. Krishna is our source. We also have our free will. We also have our individuality, and we may use that free will in a dysfunctional, unhealthy, and negative way, right? I don't know. Is that helpful, Scarlett?
But then you say about free will, but when we read in the Bhagavad Gita, that even Krishna says everything is under my control, even our mind, even our everything is under Lord Krishna's control. So how even if you say we have free will, but even that is under Lord Krishna's control, right?
Yes, I mean it does get you know, this is like a deep theological discussion, and there are others who could say a lot more on it, but in a simple way we can understand that there is Krishna's direct will and indirect will. There's what Krishna specifically wants, and there's what Krishna is allowing, right? It's like you know, like I again using the example of a parent, you know, a parent may try to instruct their child, this is the best thing for you. But not all children will learn like that. Sometimes they need to learn themselves. And the parent will, if the parent's like, don't put your finger in the fire, it's going to burn. That may not be good enough for the child. Then the parent may say, okay, go do whatever you want. Right? And then the parent's off on the side watching. It's taking place in a controlled way. And the child has to go and put their finger in the fire. Oh, it burns, right? So the parent has actually allowed that. It's not that the parent wanted the child to burn themselves, but the parent is allowing that to take place because they understand it's the only way they're really going to learn. So in that sense, right, many things are playing out in this world. It's not that the Lord wants people to be suffering or acting in so many terrible ways, but that's the lesson that we're learning right now. And he's allowing us, he's giving us that space and that freedom to work it out for ourselves, right? Otherwise, we're just a bunch of robots, right? It's like a mechanized system, and then love is not possible. So it's within the jurisdiction of his control, and he can intervene if he wants, just like that parent, if things start getting too serious, they can jump in and stop the child. But otherwise, they're just watching. They don't want to interfere. Let them. That's actually like an important principle in management, like let people, like not being a micromanager, right? Letting people learn, giving people the space to make mistakes, right? That's like any mature manager, they know that, like that's how you do things, right? So that's also how Krishna is operating. It's indirectly happening by his will, because he's, in the sense that he's allowing it to take, he's allowing us to express our free will, right? It's not that that's his direct will. And so what we're trying to do in the practice of Krishna consciousness, of devotion, we're trying to align ourselves with the direct will of the Lord and what is really our true nature also. Does that make sense, Scarlett? Okay. I'm glad. And Radhana Rupini, you had your hand raised.
I always heard about free will when it comes to the Lord. Like an example would be if there's a man and a woman and, you want this person to love you, you don't force them and you don't do things to force them to love you because it's not sweet. They have to love you naturally. It's their choice. So the same for us with the Lord. It's like he wants to feel our love and devotion coming from us, not that we're being forced. So that's where the free will is established, so that he can feel the sweetness instead of the force. Like everybody can't just be forced.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Beautiful, Radhana Rupini. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, it's been a great meeting. As always, wonderful to discuss these topics with all of you. Well, I guess we'll stop for today, and we'll pick up next week. Thank you all again. Have a beautiful week. Jai Shri Gurudev. Jai Shri. Jai all these.
Jai.
Bye. Thank you.
Jai Vishaka Didi ki jai.
Jai.
Jai.